Welcome to Sports Beat KC, a sports podcast presented by the Kansas City Star. On today's show, Vahe Gregorian stops by to discuss his story based on a recent trip to the Georgia hometown of Tyreek Hill. Vahe talked to several residents of the town and attempted to talk to more. We'll get into that. But the story wonderfully spoke to the emotions and conflicts felt by some of those who have known Hill the longest. Well, thanks for being here, Vahe.
Blair, thanks for having me.
Hey, before we get started in the conversation, let's just reset the Tyreek Hill timeline. So, and we'll start in March when the Overland Park Police took 2 reports at the Hill home, one for battery, another for child abuse and neglect, and those calls were made, I think it was 9 days apart. A month later, Hill was cleared of the charges by the Johnson County District Attorney, who said a crime was committed but could not determine who did it. A day later, Channel 5 released an audio with the graphic language between Hill and his girlfriend, Crystal Espinal, who's the mother of his 3-year-old and pregnant with twins. At that point, the Chiefs say Hill, who had been part of the team's off-season activities, no longer will be, and to our knowledge, he hasn't been back to the training facility. Last week, a letter from Hill's attorney made to the NFL made its way to the media and disputes claims that Hill has never punched his son in the chest or anywhere on his body or otherwise touched him in the chest in a mean-spirited way or as a form of discipline, and he described the broken arm as the result of an accident. So that's the latest chapter of the Tyreek Hill story in a nutshell. And Vahe, you went to Georgia to speak with people there, people who have known him the longest. And what were your first of all? Tell us about the town itself. Sure. It is really a dot on the map, isn't it?
It is, Blair. And so the trip itself is interesting. The place is interesting in its own right. I mean, I part of the reason I think that we both love the jobs we do is the adventure of going to see these strange new worlds or even places we're familiar with. It's a town of about 2,000 people.
Pearson, Georgia is what we're talking about.
Pearson, Georgia, 3.4 square miles.
How far from Atlanta?
It's about 220 miles from Atlanta. I had been there last fall when I went down after the Chiefs played at the Falcons, I should say, in August.
Right, preseason game.
Preseason game. Went on down, sort of trying to figure out what I could find. And in that attempt, I ended up getting with high school coaches of his who were very interesting and very helpful. If our listeners care to check it out, there was a story. The keywords, I guess, would be Jerry Hill and Tyreek Hill. Interesting mentor in his life. This time, though, I wanted to get about 20 minutes farther away to actually drill into his hometown itself. I did try to talk to other people I'd met before. But the complication here was it's a time where controversy reigns, and this is a place where he's beloved, but also people are a little rattled about what to say, and especially what to say to a guy they've never met. I mean, we encounter that all the time too, but one of the things we tried to do before we would ever make such a trip is, there's a term I guess I've heard us use that I'd never really thought of before, but get shovels in the ground a little bit. And so we did. You know, I've got a little bit of a relationship with Tyreek's birth father. He'd agreed to talk, and thought I'd get in with some of the teachers and some things of that like, and then so we decided to go. And the last thing I'll say before in this rambling burst is that there were like 5 things that happened there where I was like, it's going to work out. And then moments later, something would happen where it's like, there's just nothing I can do with this situation. And then you sort of started seeing the pattern. So a key moment for me was a moment where I thought, okay, everything's going to take a nice turn, the interesting things. I encountered a 17-year-old high school athlete in a gym. And all I did was ask him if Tyreek had ever come into that fitness center, I should call it. He instantly said, I think about him every time I drive by his house. You want me to take you there? I'm like, well, I'd had a little trouble finding the place. We had the right address, but there wasn't anything there last time I looked in the fall. Long story. Then, of course, I did go there and ultimately knock at the door a couple times and don't get an answer. And had hoped really the thing we really wanted to do was to try to talk to his grandparents who raised him, and that didn't work out.
And I believe you have talked to the grandparents before.
Actually, not just the father.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
And let's,
Derek Shaw is the father.
So let's establish that Tyreek Hill was raised by his grandparents.
He was, and he was raised. So Tyreek Hill was born to teenage parents.
Yeah.
Derek Shaw and Anisha Hill, and the decision was made that he would be raised by the grandparents. Derek went off to college, played basketball, tried to better himself.
It's a success story.
It
really
is, and interestingly enough, the way I've gotten to know Derek is he contacted us a couple years ago because he wanted to tell us about Tyreek. And Therese Paler and I went and spent about 2 or 3 hours with him one afternoon, and found him to be very smart, very level-headed. Even things that he was taking issue with in how we might view Tyreek, he said in a completely appropriate and thought-provoking way. So, good impression of him. No impression of Tyreek's grandparents. It's been a vacuum. In fact, since he came and we began putting in requests trying to reach them, back then they had an answering machine on their phone, and I guess I called too many times because Ted Cruz from the Chiefs pulled me to the side one day and said his grandparents have asked that I not call anymore, which is fine. Typically what we do is just wait for a no. I mean, if they call back and say no, okay, uncle, but they didn't. So anyway, I'm off on the track.
So those who know him best and known him the longest and raised him have never, as far as we know, have spoken publicly, except I think in a 2014 interview when Tyreek was with at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I think it was either with and I apologize to our friends in Oklahoma for not remembering which outlet. They all did a lot of good work. In fact, the Daily Oak Collegian at Oklahoma State did a nice
school
piece.
Newspaper. Right.
And so did the Oklahoman, and there was a little bit of access to the grandparents then. And this was, of course, before Tyreek got in any trouble and while he was, a budding phenomenon.
You mentioned the 17-year-old that you ran into in Pearson, a person who I was really fascinated to hear from was Jerry Braswell Jr., the pastor of the Pine Chapel Missionary Baptist Church, and he becomes an important voice in your story. Why is that?
Well, I'll tell you what, I felt inspired by the guy. I mean, and that I think that's testament to his power. I was not able to find him in person there, but he was one of the few people that called me back after I left a message. And he called and apologized because he'd been at a funeral all day the day before and was all tied up. But he wanted to talk. And interestingly enough, though, he also wanted to tell me that he had to pray about it before he wanted to talk because he is of the people there. And he's reflective of this time and I think does not want to say anything inflammatory, which could be, by the way, saying something nice could feel inflammatory right now.
You're right. That's right.
Which is a big complication with this situation, and something I was explicitly told by a few people. If I say something positive about him, then people are going to beat me up for not being sensitive, and then vice versa, that I'll betray him if I don't. Jerry Braswell Jr. struck the perfect chord. He thought about Tyreek, but he also thought about Crystal and their young son who were in his church some weeks ago. And he told me a story I'd never heard before about Tyreek coming to the church to apologize after the 2014 episode, give what he called a bona fide confession. So I found that Pastor Braswell was seeking the truth, but also seeking to give compassion and hoping for something that I'm worried can't happen, which is resolution that works between Tyreek and Crystal. I mean, far be it for us, I guess, really to judge how anybody's relationship works, but we do judge it, and it looks bad from the outside. It looks like it's unresolvable in a lot of ways.
Right. Certainly, they seem incompatible, don't they?
Yeah.
In addition to the story of Tyreek confessing to the church, before this latest episode occurred, he went and spoke to his elementary school, which I read in your story as well.
He did, and
late February, early March, I think.
It was early March, and it was around the time he was there for his birthday. I had a hard time getting the explicit facts about his birthday celebration, but I was told by a couple people that it was an open invitation to the town to come to the high school. The young man, Eli Meeks, that I met in the gym was the one who told me he was sorry he couldn't go. I needed a little more to feel like I could say that in the story, but I couldn't get it. But the elementary school was an interesting situation too, because only one media outlet was there. It was a local TV station. And I had not heard about this till I was researching and getting ready to go down there. In fact, I think the oddity is I think it came up because I was, for some reason, wondering if he might have a key to the city, which is really weird. Why would he have a key to the city? I don't know. It just seemed like, and that's where the story came up. He was given the key to the city a few days before. Just a total dumb guess. Led to that story, which led to me getting an audience with the principal of the school, who was happy to talk about that day and absolutely shut me down on any other questions about Tyreek. Even before we really started talking, he said, I'm not going to talk about him. This is probably worth noting, too. Earlier, I had called asking for the superintendent of schools, just thinking that might be a good person to talk with,
Especially in a small town.
And his assistant, put me on hold and went to him and said, he's referring me to the TV station. And I said, well, that's fine, but I said I don't want to talk to the TV station. I want to talk to him about his perspective, what Tyreek means to the town, and if this is complicated now after that, and just want to know part of it. So I felt lucky I got an audience with the principal at all.
You visited another establishment in town, which I found very telling. The restaurant.
Yeah.
And had you did not get to speak with everybody you intended to speak with at the restaurant.
No, and actually, the restaurant thing was interesting because I went there kind of with a sigh, like I'd been kicking around the town for a couple hours, and I finally thought, I'm a little hungry, and what place can I go into that at least maybe there's a shot that there's some imagery, and, well, this place, and it's their grand opening, why not give them a little business, just go in. And then I couldn't believe what I saw when I walked in. I'm like, the first person I see basically is wearing a Tyreek Hill Foundation T-shirt, then one of the waitresses has another Tyreek Hill shirt. They got this poster there. I'm like, boy, I'm a lucky son of a gun. This is going to be great. It's going to be really interesting to talk to them and have a nice burger. It was good. It was a good burger. And then I just started asking the waitress. I said, hey, so what do you guys have some affiliation with Tyreek? And I told her I was a reporter. And she, I don't want to say panicked, but she left the table right away to go over and talk to the manager. And the image of the manager or the owner, whoever she was, just seared into my head, just her visible agitation and yelling over that, we don't know him. We don't know him. It was an interesting thing because on one hand, it was like, well, I guess I'm not going to get their insights. On the other hand, it was sort of a glimpse into the mindset there. And it seemed worth using in the story. Sometimes, we're reluctant to use something that sort of happens to you, but it fit with what I was getting.
Well, it certainly spoke to a mindset, as you said, but also maybe a fear, a concern, or a circling the wagons mentality, perhaps. That's kind of what I expected you to find when you went to Pearson, Georgia, a town that wanted to protect its hero.
I think that's really right.
You took a photo of the Welcome to Town sign, and Tyreek Hill is prominent on that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I went to, this is like a 6-minute effort, but I went to all four corners of the town just because I thought, I think that's there. There's another sign. I think I took this out of the story that says the town's motto is where you're welcome to stay for a day or a lifetime. And I fiddled around with that as part of the story, thinking there's maybe an unintentional irony in that in some ways because it's a town that has had a tendency to pull back people that's what people have said to me in the past. So yeah, your wording is the right wording. And it's funny, circling the wagons was what I expected out of family and maybe close friends. And especially I reached out to many on Facebook or through phone calls and nothing back. I guess I didn't fully anticipate circling the wagons in the town. But I think that in the end, it's a form of that, right? I don't need to share my thoughts with this guy, and who's to say they're wrong? We try to tend to look at it as an opportunity for them to speak, and as Pastor Braswell sort of put it to me, well, they're worried of being misconstrued or misinterpreted or saying something they'll regret one way or another.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I understand.
It's
that.
easy to understand. It is.
Yeah. and it's understandable that the community would have pride in a player who made a mistake when he was at Oklahoma State and paid the price for that. Got kicked out of school, went to the Division II college, was dropped in the draft, 5th round pick. Some teams wouldn't touch him if there were 50 rounds. They wouldn't have picked Tyreek Hill. But he, 3 years with the Chiefs and three Pro Bowl years. I think 2 of them are all pro seasons. He just has a remarkable run here in Kansas City.
He does, and I can't separate myself from the idea that 3-year time was, from all public access points, from anything we've heard, completely clean,
incident-free.
On a path to redemption, if that's the right term, or certainly at that arc. And I think that's the part that's, in a lot of ways, the most puzzling and disappointing about the situation he's in now.
Let me ask you this, Vahe. When the decision was made to go to Georgia, you're like any reporter. You've made some calls. You have some anticipation of what you might find. Did you find what you expected? Ultimately,
I think I certainly went in teeth gritted, thinking this isn't something people are going to be eager to talk about. But I thought there was a chance that if I kept throwing up flares toward the grandparents, I thought there'd be a chance there. Way more often than not, those things seem to sort of fall into place. So you get to a point where you think, I don't know how this is going to happen. They don't answer the phone. They don't respond to Facebook messages.
It means they have a Facebook page, and I think opinions have been expressed.
Yeah, for sure.
On her page.
And they have. And one of the approaches I tried to take with her in the note I wrote her, the grandmother, was among the things we've seen on your Facebook page, or that you've expressed, are that you think there's some things that are being reported improperly or incorrect. I'd love to know what you mean by that. We'd love to be able to share your view of the story and truly give them the benefit of that. And obviously we'd have to process it properly, but I think the idea is a glimpse into his world. I think that was the hope. So I don't know that I got that. We were sort of joking in here that, at least it came to me, that maybe I just heard the Stones song the other day about you can't always get what you want, but you hope if you keep going you'll get what you need. And I guess that we felt like we moved the chains a little bit on the story. Probably didn't get the story might have hoped for. Didn't get the story might have hoped for, because I think that story would have been sitting down talking to his grandparents for a couple hours.
Those who know him best, and longest.
Yeah.
Well, but what you did is you unveiled a part of his life that people here in Kansas City, and I think those in the NFL, hadn't known. I
do think there was new and different stuff in there in a lot of ways. Not a lot, but plenty. I think you could look at him through a little different lens after reading this and be given more to think about. Certainly it left me with more to think about. I imagine the Chiefs and the NFL have read this story and have taken into account not only what you discovered in Georgia, but the letter from Tyreek Hill's attorney that we saw last week, and taking it all into account. I think this helps explain why no action has been taken on Tyreek Hill by the NFL, by the Chiefs. He's not on the exempt list, which there was a silly, I shouldn't say silly, but someone else reported in the last week in April that the NFL was considering putting him on the exempt list, which would basically is a suspension with pay. And we didn't follow up on. Not that we didn't follow up. We made our calls and checked into it and did not have the same information. And that it's 2 weeks later and that still hasn't happened. So any kind of decision about Tyreek Hill and his future with the Chiefs and with the NFL has not been determined. I think it's fair to say that even though weeks have passed since the first police report, almost 2 months now, that it's still an information gathering process, and the answers are still not known. I agree, and I think a thing that's really been interesting in about the last couple weeks, sort of particularly in that 72-hour stretch or so between when, it's a little longer than that, a week or so between when the tapes came out, which, by the way, that second day of tapes was more contextual. There's something more to be talked about with Channel 5 at some point about why they did that the way
You're
they
talking
did.
about the 911 call?
No, Crystal's, both the Crystal's recordings of Tyreek. There was a second day
You're right.
when they released more that I go back to one of the terms being him very explicitly saying, "I would never hurt our son." I would like to have heard that the first day. Now, they have their reasons, and maybe it's a little unfair for me to ask why, but it seemed puzzling to me that wasn't in the first day's release. And then, of course, the big pendulum swing of whatever it is you think of that letter from Tyreek's attorney, there certainly was interesting information there to consider. I bring this up in part because one reader today asked on Twitter about why I just ignored the text exchange with Crystal saying, I did it. I told him because I need a little more information on that. I need a little more vetting before I'm treating that as a fact in a letter from Tyreek's attorney to the NFL sainting Tyreek. And I'm not really, I hope I'm not casting aspersions on the attorney. He's doing his job and somehow or another, he's entered that into the discussion. I'm sure it's in a valid way, but I don't know if it's in a way that would meet with how you would look at it as a fact that is telling.
It left itself open to some skepticism. I mentioned this to Brooke Pryor, our Chiefs writer, last week, that yes, that text exchange is part of the letter from the attorney to the NFL. It's on the attorney's letterhead, and the letter is signed by the attorney. I guess I'm in the position not to disbelieve that the exchange occurred, but I'm with you. I just think, just to settle the matter once and for all, where was the timestamp on this?
Yeah, and where's the timestamp in the context of, was it before or after the Dubai tapes?
Exactly. Absolutely. I think that makes the big difference. Could that have been an exchange from January or some other incident?
Yeah, and by the way, even if it's a favorable time frame, I think they want to let us know that. I'm not saying that's why they haven't. I think they owe us more about that context if they want it to be treated as fact.
Well, I suspect that the NFL and the Chiefs have put in the request, maybe the demand, to know when that was issued, when the exchange occurred. So, well, it's again a story that will continue until there is some determination about, first of all, the relationship between the two, and that's paramount, right? The safety of the child and the children who are the twins that Crystal Espinal is going to deliver, and after that, we'll hear about Tyreek Hill's whatever punishment he'll serve, whatever the NFL will hand down for Tyreek Hill. And I've seen all kinds of speculation, just reading what's happened with other players, anywhere from nothing to 4 weeks to 6 weeks to half a season. Kareem Hunt got half a season, got 8 games. Ezekiel Elliott, forgot what his was, 6, I believe. Tom Brady got 4 games for inflating a football. So we're all waiting, and I don't know if we're going to get that information anytime soon. There's one investigation leads to another, and it's reopened as far as the Johnson County District Attorney is concerned. So just more to come. Hey, it's Blair Kerkhoff, and if you're listening to this, you love Kansas City sports, whether it's the Chiefs, Royals, Sporting, Mizzou, KU, or K-State. And no one covers these teams like the Kansas City Star. If you currently subscribe to the paper or have a digital subscription, thank you for your support. And if you don't, here's a great offer. It's called Sports Pass, unlimited digital access to every sports story and video on kansascity.com. And it's just $30 for the first year. It's the best sports value in town, just 8 cents a day or $2.50 a month. You can't beat that. Subscribe now at kansascity.com/sportspass. Okay, Vahe, you've done the reporting. You get in your rental car, you pull out of the town of Pearson, Georgia, past the Welcome to Pearson home of Tyreek Hill signs. You're heading back to Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta. What are you thinking?
Well, first thing I do is what sports writers do, or probably a lot of journalists do. I put Panera in the phone, and I find one 42 miles away. That seems like a good start back to Atlanta.
Because, of course,
Wi-Fi and coffee.
Yep, Wi-Fi and coffee.
So I'm headed to, I'm not looking for an endorsement deal with Panera, but I think they should know that we're available.
But if they're listening.
For this podcast. At any rate, I drive through the town of Enigma. I really do. Enigma, Enigma. And I'm struck a little bit by that's what this whole thing is, enigmatic. And anyway, but I left there with my head just kind of spinning a little bit because I do feel like I learned more about him. I think I was able to convey more about him. But I think as we go forward, we find there are more layers, more tentacles to this, and that it's a great reminder that things that appear to be certain often aren't. And I think that's an occupational, I don't want to call it a hazard, but it's a pitfall waiting for us all the time. And I think hopefully it's the sort of thought that sharpens our consciousness of that, and you stay cognizant of the need to keep going and learn more. And I hope also, it made me think also we need to all remember, not just as journalists, but as people, about being open-minded and trying to understand, right? It's the old, before you try to be understood, try to understand. And I think one way or another we can all use more of that with this.
For sure. And look, not that it has driven our coverage at all, but social media has played a role in this, in terms of, I think, the conversation and where people stand. And maybe, lines and sands got drawn when that probably shouldn't have happened. Let's continue to let this play out and see where, just see where we are.
Well, and to that point too, Blair, and I this might have come off a little preachy, but I felt the need to get a paragraph or a few sentences in the story, just reminding myself as much as anybody, but reminding that I know nothing about what it feels like to grow up in Pearson, Georgia. I know nothing about what it feels like to have somebody from I'm doing air quotes, the big city, whatever you want to call us, come in there and want to talk about it. Everything comes from its own. I kept thinking that everybody has their own truths in this, and that there's this little place on the Venn diagram where it all meets, and I don't know where that place is, right? But there's some place on all that. I think we can all agree Tyreek and Crystal have a difficult relationship. I think we can all agree that the safety of their son and the twins is paramount here. Doesn't seem like there's a lot else we can agree on right now. It's just stipulate into evidence, as they say on Perry Mason. You watch that show, right?
I have watched that show, indeed.
So that's all. Just another thought that way.
Well, I think we can all agree that, at least for those who have read it, it was a fantastic story, and congratulations on it.
Well, thanks. It was shepherded nicely by our brilliant editors and other reporters that spent time helping me with it, too.
All right, Vahe. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Thanks, Blair.
Links to Vahe's stories and others written about this topic can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Shout out to Kathy Liu and to Leah Becerra for putting the show together. You've been listening to Sports Beat KC. I'm Blair Kerkhoff, and we'll talk Kansas City sports again soon.